and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shuja, and these are the headlines. Myanmar's UN ambassador and the military junta have made rival claims over who represents the country at the United Nations. And ousted President Win Myint has been charged with breaching the constitution, punishable by up to 3 years in prison. Meanwhile, security forces and protesters faced off in Mandalay as demonstrations against the coup continue to rage. The United States has pressed Ethiopia to end hostilities in the northern Tigray region. The State Department says Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke with Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in a phone call. Blinken cited a growing number of credible reports of atrocities and human rights violations and abuses. Saudi Arabia says only vaccinated pilgrims will be allowed to perform Hajj this year due to COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, Brazil has reported a record of 1,641 deaths overnight, with the toll crossing 257,000. Here in Pakistan, the virus has infected more than 1,300 people and claimed 75 lives in the past 24 hours. Nationwide, the numbers of deaths has topped 13,000. Globally, there are 2.5 million fatalities and nearly 115 million cases. Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa has urged joint efforts to thwart hostile attempts aimed at reversing hard-earned normalcy in the erstwhile tribal areas. He was interacting with tribal leaders during his visit to South and North Waziristan. The Army Chief said Pakistan is committed to peace and stability in the region and playing its part by enhancing border security. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. Myanmar's UN ambassador and the military junta have made rival claims over who represents the country at the United Nations. The UN spokesperson says the ruling military had terminated Kyaw Moe Tun and appointed its deputy Tin Maung Naing. But in a letter to the United Nations General Assembly President, Kyaw Moe Tun said he is Myanmar's ambassador. The United States also says that Myanmar's envoy to the United Nations in New York remains in position. Meanwhile, ousted President Win Myint has been charged with breaching the constitution, punishable by up to 3 years in prison. And security forces and protesters faced off in Mandalay as demonstrations against the coup continue to rage. Protesters used a fire extinguisher to create a cover while throwing objects towards the police. The military has killed 21 protesters so far in the crackdown. The United States has pressed Ethiopia to end hostilities in the northern Tigray region. The State Department says Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke with Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in a phone call. Blinken cited a growing number of credible reports of atrocities and human rights violations along with abuses. The Secretary of State called for the withdrawal of outside forces from Tigray. He asked that Addis Ababa work with the international community to facilitate an independent probe into the abuse and to hold those responsible accountable. He acknowledged Ethiopia's recent announcement of full and unhindered humanitarian access in Tigray. The United States has expressed concern over the possible reprocessing of nuclear fuel for bombs by North Korea. This comes after the International Atomic Energy Agency highlighted Pyongyang's continued nuclear activity. Speaking at a virtual event, head of intelligence for the United States Indo-Pacific Command, Rear Admiral Michael Strudman, warned that such activity could raise tensions with Pyongyang. Strudman said that North Korea's doings could be aimed at getting the Biden administration's attention. He added Pyongyang could use the activity as a bargaining chip to press for sanctions relief. The new U.S. administration is currently conducting a full review of the North Korea policy. Saudi Arabia says only vaccinated pilgrims will be allowed to perform Hajj this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, Brazil has reported a record of 1,641 deaths overnight, with the toll crossing 257,000. Globally, COVID-19 has claimed more than 2.5 million lives and infected nearly 115 million people so far. More in this report.
While the developments in vaccines bring hopes of normalcy, new variants of COVID-19 have got governments mulling the decision to ease restrictions. The UNICEF says more than 168 million children worldwide have had schools completely shut for almost a year, and 214 million students have missed more than 3/4 of in-person learning. Scientists warn a highly transmissible COVID-19 variant that emerged in Brazil and has now been found in at least 20 countries, which can infect people who previously recovered from the disease. Even with such news, the U.S. state of Texas has lifted the mask mandate and declared that it is time to open 100%. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden says the country is on track to have enough vaccines for every adult in the country.
And I'm pleased to announce today, as a consequence of the stepped-up process that I've ordered and just outlined, this country will have enough vaccine supply, I'll say it again, for every adult in America by the end of May. By the end of May. That's progress, important progress.
In Europe, the uptake of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine in France stood at 24%, well below the country's target of between 80 and 85%. Spain says it will buy 17 million more doses of Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine as part of a new deal negotiated by the European Union. Meanwhile, Italy has ordered the closure of all schools in the hardest-hit areas and extended curbs on businesses and movement until after Easter. But battling the world's worst surge in cases, the Czech Republic has reluctantly entered a stricter 3-week lockdown.
People are really angry. The leading politicians are breaking the rules which they had themselves designed. And then they are surprised that people with lower IQ are saying that they do not want to adhere to the restrictions when the politicians are not keeping them. The whole problem is in the people governing us.
A coalition of healthcare experts says out of 412 COVID-19 related attacks on medics worldwide, India had the highest number of 128. Meanwhile, Australia says it will seek the support of the Defence Forces in its COVID-19 immunisation drive.
In Pakistan, COVID-19 has claimed 75 more lives and infected nearly 1,400 people in the past 24 hours. This pushes the nationwide death toll to over 13,000. Health officials say Pakistan has reported over 583,000 cases since the pandemic began. The health ministry says there are more than 16,000 active cases across the country. So far, over 554,000 people have recovered from the disease. Meanwhile, Pakistan, Nigeria, and Indonesia will be among the biggest recipients of the COVAX vaccine initiative. Islamabad will receive more than 10 million doses before June. Pakistan's army chief has urged joint efforts to thwart hostile attempts aimed at reversing hard-earned normalcy in the Urwal's tribal areas. General Qamar Javed Bajwa was interacting with tribal leaders during his visit to South and North Waziristan. The army chief said Pakistan is committed to peace and stability in the region and playing its part by enhancing border security. He said vigilance is required to foil attempts to create chaos and reversing the gains of Operation Radul Fasad. The army chief also met with the forward troops in the area. General Bajwa lauded their commitment and ensuring a secure environment to implement the route of civil administration. The former Chief Minister of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir has moved the High Court over New Delhi's refusal to issue her passport. In a petition, Mehbooba Mufti said the passport has been denied so far because of the lack of police verification. The former chief minister said she has the right to hold a passport as she is a citizen. She has the right also that has asked the court to take action against those who limited her personal liberty by not responding to her request. In India, farmer unions say their leaders will visit poll-bound states and seek votes in favor of parties contesting against BJP. The unions say they also have decided to expand their campaign across India to widen their support base beyond 3 states. Addressing a rally, a union leader said they will appeal to people to punish the government for bringing anti-farm laws. Meanwhile, the Maharashtra government is under fire for ordering a probe into tweets by BJP's IT cell on the protest. In Punjab, the ruling Congress party has hailed the chief minister for his standing against the new farm laws. Tens of thousands of farmers continue to stage protests at the border points of New Delhi against the contentious farm laws. France has asked Iran to make clear gestures towards the resumption of a dialogue over the 2015 nuclear deal. The Elysee Palace says President Emmanuel Macron expressed deep concern over Iran's decisions to violate the accord. In a statement, the presidential office said that it is Tehran's vital that it returned to the compliance and cooperated with the United Nations atomic watchdog. Meanwhile, Iranian state media says Tehran has made it clear that the only way to revive the deal would be for the United States to lift sanctions. It repeated that Iran's decision to reduce its obligations under the deal was due to the United States withdrawal in 2018. The United States has imposed sanctions on 2 military leaders of the Houthi movement in Yemen. The Treasury Department says it has blacklisted Houthi Naval Chief Mansour al-Saadi and Air Commander Ahmed Ali Ehsan al-Hamzi. In a statement, it said the Houthi leaders had prolonged the country's civil war and aggravated the humanitarian crisis. The department said Washington condemns the destruction of civilian sites by the Houthi militants. This comes weeks after the United States revoked the designation of Yemen's Houthi rebels as a terrorist organization. Washington said that the move was needed due to a dire humanitarian situation in Yemen. The Saudi-led military coalition says it has intercepted and destroyed an explosive-laden drone launched by the Houthi rebels in Yemen. The Saudi state media said that the drone was targeting the southern regions of the kingdom. The Houthi rebels have yet to comment on the incident. Earlier, 5 civilians were injured after a Houthi military projectile fell in the Jazan region. Riyadh said that the projectile's debris damaged several buildings and vehicles. The United States has decided to increase multilateral pressure on Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro to hold fresh elections. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made the remarks over a phone call with Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said Blinken stressed the importance of fresh and fair polls. In a statement, Price said that the Secretary of State pressed for a peaceful democratic transition in Venezuela. He added Blinken and Guaido also discussed urgent humanitarian needs in the country, and Blinken applauded efforts to find solutions and committed to continued U.S. support to Venezuelans. In the United States, the Federal Bureau of Investigation has termed the Capitol Hill riots on the 6th of January as domestic terrorism. Director Chris Wary says there is no evidence that leftist extremists disguise themselves as the supporters of ex-President Donald Trump. In his testimony to the Senate Judiciary Committee, Wary said Antifa people had no connection with the storming of the Capitol. On the contrary, he said a number of the rioters belonged to far-right militia or were motivated by racial ideologies. Wary vowed to hold them accountable. The Justice Department has charged over 300 people with crimes ranging from conspiracy to attacking police and obstructing Congress. The riots left 5 dead. In the United States, at least 13 people have died after a tractor-trailer slammed into a Ford Expedition in Southern California. Highway Patrol officials says 10 of those deceased were Mexicans. The SUV is typically designed to hold 5 to 8 people. The officials said it was crammed with 25 people, including children. The National Transportation Safety Board says it will investigate the incidents with California Highway Patrol. A London court has awarded $630,000 to the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, to cover her legal costs. This comes after she won a privacy claim against a UK tabloid that printed extracts of a letter to her father. At a remote hearing, Lord Justice Warby refused permission for the newspaper to appeal the ruling. Last month, the court ruled that the tabloid had infringed her copyright. It ruled in her favor without holding a trial, saying the articles were a clear breach of privacy. Meghan's legal team is seeking more than $2 million in legal fees, with half the amount to be paid within 14 days. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Asian stocks have climbed as the focus turns back to the stimulus-fueled recovery from the pandemic, while Treasury yields edged up. Indexes in Hong Kong and China outperformed. Japan's Nikkei 225 rose close to 0.5%. Seoul's Kospi has gained over 1%. The ASX 200 in Australia has also gained close to 1%. Major G20 economies have agreed to raise IMF reserves with a new allocation of the special drawing rights currency. This gives a potential boost for lending to poor countries. At the African Fiscal Forum, IMF's head, Kristalina Georgieva, said that they got a green light from G20 to work on a new SDR allocation. Without specifying the currency unit, she said $500 billion would be allocated, which would be every member of the IMF will get its share. Earlier, finance officials from the group of 20 major economies expressed broad support for boosting the IMF's emergency reserves. The International Air Transport Association says the crisis has worsened for airlines in January due to COVID-19. Global airline body says the international traffic plunged 86% in the month compared to previous pre-crisis levels. In the statement, it said domestic air traffic was down 47%. IATA chief economist said new variants of the coronavirus have forced the governments to tighten travel restrictions. Brian Pierce said that the situation is hurting the outlook for airlines with a tough start to the year. Airlines for America's CEO Nick Callio says U.S. airlines are losing $150 million a day. Callio said that the airline industry is asking lawmakers to extend billions of dollars in financial assistance. Nick Callio said tens of thousands of workers will lose their jobs or get wage cuts when the aid package expires on the 1st of April. In the Pakistan Super League, Islamabad United beat Quetta Gladiators by 6 wickets at the National Stadium in Karachi. United's Fahim Ashraf was declared man of the match for his brilliant bowling figures of 3 for 11. Paul Sterling scored 56, helping United chase down a 157-run target with 3 overs to spare. Zahid Mahmood was picked of the bowlers for his 2 of 29. United have jumped to the 2nd spot with this win, while Gladiators are yet to register a win this season. In English Premier League, a brace from Gabriel Jesus has steered Manchester City to a 4-1 win over the Wolverhampton Wanderers. City's 21st straight victory in all competitions moved them 15 points clear atop the table. Lander Denocker's own goal drove Pep Gualdero's side into the lead in the 15th minute. Wolves managed to draw a level in the 61st minute with a diving header from Connor Cody. Jesus restored City's lead in the 80th minute, followed by Mahrez slotting home the 3rd in the final minute. Jesus then netted City's 4th in the stoppage time after an offside decision was overturned. Norway's Therese Johaug has successfully defended her 10 kilometers title as Nordic Ski World Championships in Germany. The 32-year-old kept a blistering pace despite the undulating terrain and balmy temperatures. She completed the freestyle cross-country skiing race 54 seconds faster than silver medalist Frida Karlsson from Sweden. Karlsson compatriot Ebba Andersson secured the third position by finishing ahead of American Jessie Diggins. It was the 12th world gold medal for Johaug, and Marit Bojorgen and Ellen Valby have more titles than Johaug. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at indus.news.